I think resilience is table stakes. Like if you don't have a resilient supply chain, then you're going to die as a business. But agility is more important because agility allows you to actually capitalize on a challenge because you can turn on a dime. You can adjust. You can make those lever changes and the whole business can shift to actually go towards where these opportunities are. Supply chains are not only critical and crucial to commercial benefit to organization, but it is also crucial and critical for benevolent good.
I'm Richard Howells, and this is The Future of Supply Chain, a podcast where we discuss hot topics, best practices, and the latest innovations in today's global business. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the hot topic of what private equity companies are looking for from companies they invest in. And to do so, I'm joined by somebody that I've known quite a while. We've met all over the world, and now we're doing it via podcast. But I'm joined by Reveal's Martin Rowan. So, Martin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Richard. It has been a while and we have seen literally each other on all four corners of the world. So it's great doing this. It is kind of weird that we're doing it virtually like this, even though we've hung out together many times.
Yes, I feel like we should have a beer in front of us, make it more natural.
I think you can organize that somewhere.
But maybe before we start, for those of people that don't know you, maybe you can introduce yourself a little and tell us a little bit about your company.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm the managing partner for Reveal. I'm actually one of the co-founders as well. And we started in 2005 when we realized that a lot of organizations that invest in SAP, or frankly any ERP, but let's specifically talk here SAP, put the technology in and then they don't really know how to run their business to the level of performance that they want or expect. And often those return on investments, those beautiful numbers that everybody promised that will happen when you implement, very rarely get realized. Often the success factor of it is it went live, check. The data is okay, check. No, nothing crashed and burned, check. The customer got his product, check. Those are like basic, essential measures of success. We feel like if you think of SAP as an asset and you want to consider it as a plant or a piece of equipment and you spend millions of dollars on it, you cannot underutilize it. You got to really utilize it. And if you do, and when you do, it has a tremendous power to get you all of the returns that you expect. So we're big believers that if we deploy it correctly and apply it correctly, it will produce those results. So that's what Reveal does, is help companies achieve the business performance that they hope to have gotten the first time.
That word reveal is quite telling in the name of your company with that description as well.
Yeah, reveal the hidden value in your SAP technology, correct? Yeah,
Exactly. So this conversation was triggered by a LinkedIn article that I read that you published recently, and it was titled, "Private Equity Doesn't Invest for Stability, It Invests for Performance." And maybe we can start there. What changes for a company once they attract private equity investors?
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple, and most people understand this to some degree, right? Is that when you undergo something like a private equity investment, you already know the rules have changed. It's going to be faster, more focused, financially unforgiving in some cases. And even though PE firms will talk about, hey, we care about the culture, they really, for the most part, are driving increased enterprise value. Because either using you as a platform or adding you to a platform, and their main goals at the end of the day is how do I expand my margins? How do I free up cash? And how do I do something more with what this investment is going to take? So there's a lot of similarity as the way a PE firm looks at a business in the way we want people to start looking at SAP. It's an asset. Let's exploit the asset. Right.
Yeah. So I guess the $1 million question or multi-million dollar question is, are most companies ready? And if not, what advice would you give them?
That is a $1 million question. I think that from a practical readiness, obviously that's got a lot more to do with the ability of the financial state of the business and obviously the interest of the PE firm. But I don't know if organizations are necessarily at the level of performance that maybe the PE firms would expect. Often they expect that they are able to say, hey, we have SAP, we have an enterprise system, we have a platform, a system platform we can work from. That's almost, again, another checkbox. But in reality, it's if you really want, or if the PE firm really wants to maximize it, they got to know that the system is actually performing at its fullest. So I guess the long and the short of it is, no, probably most companies that got purchased are probably not really perfectly poised to really expand and just take that investment that was injected into them and grow with it.
So, what happens once you get that post infusion jolt? You mentioned things happening quicker, there's more pressure. But what happens in a company? The common things that you
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, everything speeds up at that point, right? So the board reshapes, there's leadership turnover, there's cultural inefficiencies that overtake. There are sometimes rifts that go through the company. Bonuses are tied up in a different way now. They are linked to EBITDA, cash flow, measurable outcomes. Things just shift. And the strategic drag of the gap between kind of the leadership intent and the operational execution becomes basically the enemy. Is we all want to perform well, but while operational execution is still the 1980s kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the drag. And even with a sophisticated system like SAP, whether it's ECC or S4 or any future state, that drag will continue to exist if we operationally cannot execute. So the hard truth, as a matter of fact, is that most SAP-run companies' value isn't generated through the platform. It's trapped inside of the platforms, right? The siloed processes, the bloated inventory, the spreadsheets, the workarounds, et cetera, et cetera. So the system is usually stable. You and I know that. We've been in this business for long enough, but it's not strategic. It's too often still seen as just another tool to get the job done.
It sounds like, and I know it is the case, that most companies should be reacting and working with a business system
Yeah.
with the same goals in mind, whether they've got private equity investment or not, because it's the right thing to do. So let's assume the company has SAP.
Mhm.
How do they best leverage the solutions to meet the demands of a private equity company and the demands of maximizing your business?
Yeah. I think the first thing to know for an organization when they do that is to know that SAP isn't broken, it's underutilized. And I think that is a absolute truth. As a matter of fact, we have been surveying companies for the last 20 years. And by the way, celebrating 20 years this year. So very excited about that. Thank you. Thank you. 94% of companies will tell you that they're not running at best practices level. 94% of SAP run companies. So if you think of that's a pretty large number across the board. And so if you realize it's not broken, because that's what we get called into, hey, this is not working for us, something's wrong. And then we usually get there and we find that it's got very little to do with the technology. It's all about
Yeah.
this is how we've always done it discussion, or these are our processes. We're unique, we're different, we're a snowflake. All the good stuff that come with it. You don't understand, we do it this way over here. And it's all of those things that kind of break the integration of SAP. And then, of course, it's just not able to meet that need. And so I think it's really the software's challenge. It really is about the underutilization of it.
Yeah, I think we've found as we've moved companies to the cloud that yes, we're unique. We have to do it this way because we've always done this way. When you move to the cloud, you can't live with that argument because you can't keep up with the latest innovations. You can't keep up with the latest releases. And you really do identify what areas are unique in your business.
Yeah.
And you have to be to differentiate with against your competition. If you're talking about doing your general ledger and finance, there's nothing unique in that. There's legal requirements, but there are certain areas of the business where you would differentiate yourself.
I love what you said there because we often hear that because we're different, this makes us unique. Therefore, we have a better customer service, or this is why I've heard this multiple times. We bend over backwards to meet our customer demand. That's what makes us unique. I'm like, wow, that's a terrible way to make yourself unique, right? Why are we not focusing on innovation and R&D and market share and value or speed to market versus saying, my procurement process is sophisticated, therefore I'm better. My manufacturing process, those things are just standard processes. We've been doing the same processes over and over for the last how many years? Even with advanced planning tools, the forecasting models that exist have existed for a long time. Even with some of the new decoupling techniques with DDMRP and some of the others, they're newish, but theory of constraints has been around for 40 years, right? And that's the same idea. And as long as companies get caught up and they think that their uniqueness is tied up in the process, they'll always fall back to this is what we've known. If they can break free from that and say, let the system do the heavy lifting, let it be the process, and let me rather rise above the transactions. Let me rather do the smart thinking. Let me put the thinking process in place, the critical thinking, if you want, right? That's how you get to the real value. And that's obviously how you differentiate yourself.
Yeah. So let's talk practical steps
Yeah.
here. What do you recommend companies do in this situation to start unleashing the power of the data that they have in the system already
Yeah.
and the power of the system?
Yeah, I'd say to you that from a practical perspective, I think there's a couple key principles. The first one is you have to start thinking about and starting a cultural shift within the organization to think that SAP is a way of doing business. You literally have to start changing that paradigm and say, SAP is an asset. I have to start thinking of it as a way of doing business, especially as you said, going to the cloud where you become a little more restrictive in terms of staying with the clean core. So that would be like the philosophical, conceptual, executive leadership kind of decision. From there, the practicality comes in. Okay, if that's true and that's the case, then I need to bring my processes back into the system. To bring
Mhm.
my processes back into the system, I need to start helping companies stop white knuckling those spreadsheets, right? They don't want to let those things go, or those custom reports that made it look like the legacy system 20 years ago. And to do that, the only way you can really do that is by actually showing organizations and their team members there's a better way. They can actually achieve the same results in the system faster and better. And if you can't do that, they will always hold on to what they have. So there'll always be what's in it for me first, and then they'll say, and what's in it for the business. They'll have both senses, but they'll want to make sure
Mhm.
that something's in it for them as well. So the change
Yeah.
management component, right, is a key one. So again, so you got to think, you got the philosophical decision, everything has to be an SAP. Then you got to have the decision to say, bring the process back into SAP. And then at the heart of it all, Richard, is that they actually have to know what they're doing. So education is foundational to it, right? If I don't know how to capacity plan in SAP and reschedule something. And if something changes, I can drag and drop using PPDS and moving it from one side to another. And everything reorganizes and the alerts go off and it tells procurement, hey, you can delay this or you got to expedite this, and tells warehouse, we're not going to, don't stage for that, but stage for this. And everything communicates with each other because somebody made that decision. You need to know not only the implications of your actions, you need to know what you're doing. And it's not a
Yeah.
2 hour training post go live or 2 day training exercise. It is true, deep understanding. That's why we use the word education as opposed to training, right?
Do you have any examples that you can share? You say you're celebrating your 20th anniversary this year. You must have worked with hundreds of
Yeah.
companies in completely different industries, different regions, different environments.
Yeah.
Are there any best practices that you can share from customers?
You're right. There are many industries and many different solutions to these industries. However, there's a common thread, especially when you're a supply chain operations type company. You've got
Yeah.
orders you take and demand. You then have a supply plan and you execute it. And you either make something, buy something, store it, and then ship it, right? And so if you start thinking of it in simple terms, it really does start helping you free your mind, frankly, from the kind of nuances that you think you're uniquely attached to. And
Yeah.
one company that comes to mind is a divestiture from GE. It's a lighting company called Current Lighting. And we'd work with the CIO there, and which is kind of rare because often our customer base is usually more the operations side, the COO, the
Right.
chief supply chain officer. But this CIO had vision, and he could see that there was a real need for the business to own it, but he needed to help drive that towards it,
Yeah, to help them get there.
help them get there. And he needed to use his capability and strategic thinking and bring us into that conversation. And what happened with them is because they divested, they went into a PE owned state. And so suddenly cash was important, working capital was important, profit was important, productivity was important, efficiencies, all these things that typically companies measure, but they're not necessarily like at the heart of it, right? If you ask any PE firm, there's two things that matter to them: cash and profit, cash and profit, cash and profit, right? That's it. Everything else is secondary to that. So they just
Yeah.
found themselves stuck in, they were still little siloed teams. They didn't trust the data. They had inflated inventories. They were stocking out in other situations. Their turns were lower than maybe expected. Execution was somewhat patchy because, again, a lot of spreadsheets were part of it. And when we were called in, there was a question mark like, is SAP the right solution for us? Because we're a much smaller company than the bigger GE, right? But do we? And we came back and said, absolutely, because you want to double in size in the next 5 years. It's the best. It's the Rolls Royce. It is the scaling tool of choice. It's not broken. Like I said earlier, it is just not, you just don't know what you don't know, right? So let's expose that to you. And so we went through this process with them, and it was incredible. Not only did their teammates and their spouses, frankly, start telling us, hey, thank you. My husband or my wife now gets home earlier. They're less stressed. They don't have to leave at 6 a.m. in the morning. They get through the day because they learned how to let the system do the work for them. And then, of course, just a tremendous amount of business value came out of it too.
So what was some of the benefits? Maybe you can share some of the operational benefits that they achieved from going through this transformation.
Yeah, so them specifically, and this is pretty common across the board, though, but for them specifically, they were able to reduce their active inventory. So this is not just material that's just obsolete, right? The active material by 23%. There's millions of dollars of cash back in the bank to them.
That's huge.
That's huge. And they did that within 12 months. So pretty impressive. They were able to also improve their turns, which obviously made them far more efficient and productive. They dropped their obsolete stock by 18%. They were able to do ATP, which is I could make a promise and keep a promise, not only to my customer, but I could actually do it to my internal customer. So purchasing could make a material check against the production, and production could say, oh, look, it's available, or it's going to be here tomorrow. So they could do ATP within their process. Visibility they've never had before. Usually it's somebody picks up the phone and says, hey, buyer, when is that material arriving, right? Now it's proactively saying, hey, this thing is going to be here tomorrow because there's an availability check that's running across the board. Better planning. They were able to do better scheduling because they started in using SAP's capacity leveling tools, which most companies just, firstly, they don't even know it exists. And secondly, they don't even know that it works well. As a side note, we work with a lubricants company out of Houston too. They were literally going to spend millions of dollars to go buy a third-party production planning solution, even though they were an SAP shop, because they felt like they just didn't know that it could exist. And only because somebody had worked with us in the past said, hey, have you just asked Reveal just to see? And so we came in, did a quick assessment, and SAP could do exactly what they needed. And they already had it. So they owned it. They didn't have to buy anything. They just had to use it. So that is basically a similar story that happens all over the place and all around the world, by the way. It's not a North American problem only.
That's great. As you said a little earlier, all that the private investors care about are costs and profit.
Yeah.
So how did it affect the bottom line? What were the financial benefits?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you just think of inventory reduction, those percentages that I mentioned earlier, I mean, that is literally just cash in the bank. And not only is it a one-time cash injection back into the business, you have cost of money. So there's an annual continuous savings from that cost of inventory tied up. You have holding costs that you're able to free up. So again, just the immense amount of cash that is released throughout. Actually, it reminds me another slight story is we were working with a company here in Chicago. They're more of a wholesale distributor, and they were dealing with something similar around the inventory side. And they were actually going to go build a completely new warehouse. That's how much inventory they were struggling to handle. And after a 6 months initiative, within 9 months from the start of the initiative, 6 months on site, 9 months total with some support, they were able to reduce the inventory probably similar to these kind of numbers. So much so, they literally stopped the warehouse build project. And you can imagine how much that saves.
Freed up some cash.
Talk about freeing up cash, right? And then, of course, faster turns, that leads to just greater service. And then just simplifying your technology and your processes, you free up human capital. So we talk a lot about human struggle hours. That isn't necessarily a PE metric, right? But that's huge because now you're giving people time back and they can do the smart work and then free up more cash. So yeah, between EBITDA and cash, huge savings for these organizations.
So I'm betting that people listening to this will be very interested in everything that you've been saying. And they'll be interested in learning how they can better leverage the solutions they've already invested
Yeah.
in. So maybe you get one more chance before we wrap up with the final questions to explain where can people learn more about the projects that you've talked about and Reveal in general.
Yeah. I think the thing I want to leave the audience with would be this is not just a PE problem, right? And it's not just a
Yep.
PE owned business problem, right?
It's using the system to the best of its ability.
It's been a problem forever. And like I said, 9 out of 10 companies is and are leaking profit and cash. And I'm talking about SAP-run companies. And again, it's got nothing to do with the software. So I want to be clear about that. It is how we've deployed it, how we use it, and are we able to reveal the hidden value in it. So the first thing is everybody, if you're one of those 9, and it's easy to check that, by the way, you can go onto our website, revealvalue.com, and there's a self-assessment you can run. It's a handful of questions, and it'll literally give you a score on where you are in the maturity and how much money is possibly being tied up in your business. So that would be definitely a recommendation to just start. Go to revealvalue.com. But then I would say the more practical step post that would be is you need to start lifting the hood and getting a better sense of what it looks like. So even though that self-assessment will give you a sense, it's not going to give you a very practical where to go look specifically in your business for that hidden value. And so what we offer then is something called a wellness assessment. So it's basically a health check, if you want. How well are we doing? It's a 2-week assessment, super fast. And it's fast because we use a data-centric approach. So we will go into the system, look at how it's supposed to work, and then see how it actually is working, and then start defining those gaps as recommendations, map that out as a roadmap, and then share with the team like, hey, if you did these 3 things, here's all the savings you can get. If you did these 4 things, here's an additional level of savings. So you can actually map out and prioritize where to look. Because one of the things I think companies struggle with is inherently, I think they all know there's a latent pain, if you want. They know something's wrong. They don't necessarily know where or how. And they may put a SWAT team together and say, hey, go fix the master data, or go do this over there, right? Or make our forecast get better. And those are all very point solutions, and they have marginal impact. If you want to make a transformative impact in your business and you really want to start capitalizing on this SAP asset, you have to look much broader than that. And you have to start thinking about how do you bring the entire organization to the forefront. And that's critical. And I wanted to maybe leave one thing, because obviously we probably need to talk about this too, Richard, is the whole AI, right?
By the way, you just broke the record. We've been talking for about 22 minutes and the term AI hadn't come up. So
I know.
congratulations. You've not.
And I felt like I didn't want to necessarily promote it. I just want to tell everybody it's not the panacea and it's not the easy button. And the reason is because if you think about the maturity of most organizations, 9 out of 10 companies are leaking profit due to bad data, bad processes, lack of understanding of how it works. The rules don't reflect reality, all those basic things. Guess what AI is going to use to give you a prediction?
The bad data.
The bad data, the bad rules, the bad processes, right? And so it's going to just accelerate the chaos if you want, man. It doesn't really take you to the next day. Now, it can, if you're the 1 out of 10 that is truly optimized and you're getting all the value out of it, and you really need to accelerate that, absolutely. But it is a little bit like lipstick on a pig. Like, S4 is going to solve everything. An advanced planning tool is going to solve everything. AI is going to solve it. That's not true. Like, there's some fundamentals and first principles that need to be addressed.
Yes, they will solve everything once you are confident that your data is correct to start with, because any system in the world, if the data is wrong, it could be the best system in the world, it could be the worst system in the world. It's still going to be doing it on the wrong data.
I'm doing exactly right. Yeah. And I think if you think of SAP is obviously introducing Joule into it, there's a lot of other tools out there that people are trying to implement and consider. At the end of the day, one of the things I fear a little bit is that executives are going to start trusting the predictions that the AI is going to give without validation or against first principles. Like, you can say, hey, we're going to move into this market segment. And if you look at our consumption over here and our inventory placement, what do you think is the best thing? And it's come back and say, oh, you should expand into the South region. Based on what? Like, again, the bad data, or is there some real good logic or first principles associated to it? And so being able to know then to ask for what are those first principles, or how did you get to this answer, and which data did you use? Because that's
Yeah,
key.
because AI will come back with the right answer based on the data it's got.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. And we mustn't forget it's a predictor, right? It's not, unless you give it 1+1 will equal 2, it is predicting that if you have certain elements, this is most likely the outcome. And those elements that feed it have to be pretty accurate. That's beside the hallucination issue. I'm just talking about garbage in, garbage out concepts, right?
Yeah. Hey, Martin, we're coming to the end of the podcast, so you probably know the question I'm going to ask next. I ask all of my guests, but in a sentence or two, what's the future of supply chain?
Man, I know you asked that question, and it's such a big one. So I'll start with saying that for Reveal, that's our roots, is the supply chain and operational side, right? We very much believe in that supply chains are not only critical and crucial to commercial benefit to organization, but it is also crucial and critical for benevolent good. If you think of people that don't have food, don't have resources, don't have things, it's supply chains that get the product and the people to them. And the food, as an example. We work closely with companies like Feed My Starving Children from a supply chain perspective to ensure that's happening. Now, on the flip side, in a business, it's tremendously crucial, right? Because at the end of the day, if you think of supply chain in its true sense, end-to-end sense, it is everything from order, requirement, all the way to delivery and everything in between, right? And so I don't think the future of supply chains is a question of if. It's absolutely a question of how's it going to continue and how do you speed that up? And I think what we need to be careful for is not to just look towards technology to solve it. I do think we have to start saying it's the crawl, walk, run, sprint mindset. Are we in a crawl state? Do we trust the data? Can we actually use what we have? And if you're an SAP shop, go and maximize that, exploit that. Then start walking and get better at it. Then start running. And then when you want to sprint, you're ready for it. You can take that leap. And that's how you're going to get the return on investment, not only for your current situation, but it's going to set you up for your future. Because the agility piece is what's crucial too. You and I talk about this all the time. Resilience is often the go-to word for supply chains, right? You got to have a resilient supply chain. Personally, I think resilience is table stakes. Like if you don't have a resilient supply chain, then you're going to die as a business. But agility is more important because agility allows you to actually capitalize on a challenge because you can turn on a dime, you can adjust, you can make those lever changes, and the whole business can shift to actually go towards where these opportunities are. So agility and using the technology to drive that is key. If you are not agile, then resilience is, like I said, is the bare bones of what you need to have. So the future of the supply chain is strong.
Martin, thanks for a great conversation. I didn't expect anything less, but it's been a lot of fun, as ever.
Richard, it's so good hanging out with you. We do need to do it together next time so we can have a beer and just chit-chat some more. But yeah, anytime. If you want to chat some more at any given time, feel free to reach out. I look forward to it again. Nice catching up.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for listening. Please mark us as a favorite and you can get regular updates and information about future episodes. But until next time, from Martin and I, thanks for discussing the future of supply chain.